I am from the United States, and thankfully, I don't actually have to live there. I live in the Czech Republic, which is better because they have this little mole guy and they spank women on Easter. It's peak culture. There are a couple of issues, though, with living in Europe as an American. The first, no Zaxby's, heartbreaker. I would almost call it a deal breaker if my home country wasn't fundamentally evil. The other issue is that US sports are a bit idiosyncratic. The sports most Americans enjoy and discuss on a daily basis are not being discussed or broadcast regularly into the homes of most other families pretty much anywhere in the world. Of course, it's possible to just watch American leagues on TV here. There are ways of accomplishing this. But the time zone change is usually very annoying, if not borderline impossible, unless you're really dedicated to that 4 a.m. Chicago Fire match. Plus, I don't always want to watch through a screen. What if I want to watch one of the big American sports in person here? What if I want to go see a basketball game, go see an American football game? Well, basketball is the easiest answer. In most European countries, it's easily the US invented sport with the furthest global reach. It competes and probably even beats football in terms of overall popularity in at least 4 European countries, and EuroLeague attendances just keep going up. The Czech Republic does not have a team in EuroLeague, unfortunately, because EuroLeague would rather showcase top-tier European talent like Dubai and Israel. But there is a domestic Czech basketball league. It is not insanely popular, but the best team in the league just made the quarterfinal of the basketball version of Champions League as of writing this, so there's some quality and enough of a crowd that I can still go watch and have a good time, I think. Baseball is also a thing here, and anyone who's seen the World Baseball Classic almost certainly knows this one Czech pitcher named Ondřej Sartoria, and if you know Ondřej Sartoria, then you probably know that he struck out Shohei Ohtani while being a part-time electrician. And that last part is important because it means that there is no professional baseball league here, only semi-pro. Plus, baseball isn't exactly thriving in the United States either, so let's get it back on track maybe at home before trying to establish any professional leagues in Europe. And then there is American football, and for my national compatriots watching this, obviously soccer is football here, and so what they call our football is American football here. And you might think to yourself, well, okay, so if the sport is so uniquely American that they call it American football in Europe, then it must barely have a presence on the continent, right? Well, what if I told you it does have a presence in Europe? What if I told you there isn't just one Euro-wide American football league, but 3? What if I told you that they all hate each other? What if I told you the history of American football in Europe is one disaster after another with no end in sight? What if I stripped butt naked in front of you and drooled all over myself? So let's go back to the beginning of American football in Europe to tell this story. Do you know the very first person to watch American football in Europe? I don't. It was probably some American soldiers or in Berlin or something. If we could find that out though, that would really get this story going. So American football has been played on the European continent as early as World War I, but it existed almost exclusively as a sport played by American soldiers stationed in Europe rather than something adopted by the locals. Here's the 5th Army and 12th Air Force playing in the Spaghetti Bowl, a game that took place in US-occupied Italy near the end of World War II. This is basically the only form in which the sport existed in Europe until the first American football leagues on the continent began in the late 1970s in Germany, West Germany, and Italy. Just a side note that I find it fascinating that the transfer of American football interest to Europeans at its roots wasn't the result of a marketing campaign, but just Italy and Germany being the 2 countries where we had a lot of US troops stationed for a really long time, and so there was this natural cultural transfer that took place over time. It's pretty cool. What if we infiltrated more countries throughout the rest of the century, and instead of bringing sports, we just brought destabilization and death? I mean, look at all those countries south of us. What are they doing? They seem bored. The German league in particular might be the most consistent and impactful league for American football in Europe. It's been running nonstop for 47 years and has tens of thousands of genuinely dedicated fans across the country. The German Bowl, Germany's equivalent to the Super Bowl, had more than 22,000 people attend in 2025, and at its peak in 1999 had more than 30,000 people attend. And I mean, okay, that's peanuts compared to a Super Bowl final, and maybe even your average college football bowl, especially if we add in TV viewership. But at the same time, did you know there's an American football league outside of the US pulling those kinds of numbers? Nobody talks about it in the US, I feel like, and it's genuinely impressive. They even have Pro-Rel. You heard me right. Tremble in fear, Cleveland Browns fans. If you finish bottom of the table in German American football, you move down into the second division and you're replaced by whoever finished top of the second division in the same season. I genuinely love to see this. I think this is a necessary feature of European sports, and I think anyone trying to force the closed league system from the United States in is doomed to fail. Hint, hint, foreshadowing, subtle hint. So now that we've talked about the one American football success story in Europe, let's talk about the ever-growing money sinkhole that is every single attempt at starting a continental league. So, okay. European Football League, World League of American Football, Football League of Europe, who could forget NFL Europe, plus some attempts at an American Football Champions League, like the Big Six European Football League and the International Federation of American Football's Europe Champions League, and most recently, confirmed as of writing this, the European League of Football, aka the ELF, what was for a few years considered the best modern attempt at bringing professional American football to Europe, has been declared insolvent by a court in Hamburg, Germany. All of those names I just mentioned are now defunct attempts at establishing an international American football league in Europe with teams from Budapest to London to Vienna and lots of other major cities. I want to focus on the ELF though, not just because it's the most recent ship to hit an iceberg, but because of the drama it left all in its wake. The ELF could have been what finally broke through and made American football more mainstream in Europe. Certainly that's what its German-Croatian founder Željko Karajica was hoping for. And to be fair, there's an argument to be made that it was working. In 2024, the ELF reported that the season's final between the Vienna Vikings and the Rhine Fire was attended by more than 41,000 fans. That smashes the German Football League's attendance record for a final that I mentioned earlier. It even exceeds the average attendance for most Bundesliga 2 clubs, which is a significant comparison because the ELF final was hosted at the Veltins Arena in Gelsenkirchen, Germany, the home of FC Schalke. So, what happened? September 2025. The fifth season of the ELF concludes with Stuttgart Surge beating the Vienna Vikings 24-17 to claim their first title. If you're following the ELF at the time though, you probably already know that there is trouble brewing. Count them, half of the league's 16 teams have formed a union, the EFA, or European Football Alliance, and their concerns are legion. Chaotic leadership, poor transparency, and bad payment discipline, with reports of referees refusing to officiate ELF matches because of how long it takes them to get paid what they're owed. There are attempts to mediate these issues throughout the season, but they go nowhere. By the time Stuttgart has won its first ELF title, 11 of the ELF's 16 teams are now in the EFA, and it's no longer just a union bartering for better conditions, it is a mutiny, aiming to break away and start its own American Football League. This harmonious union of teams wanting to start their own league on their own terms lasts all of about 16 minutes, and then there's another breakaway when the teams can't unanimously agree on a funding model for their new league. So now if you're paying attention, there are 3 continental American football leagues in Europe, and they are all planning to operate a 2026 season, which should go fine. Željko Karajica, the ELF CEO I mentioned earlier, makes the pretty obvious assertion that 3 leagues eating each other's cookies like this is not going to work. What he really means when he says that, though, is no, don't leave. No, you have like contracts and everything's fine. Just come back inside. We'll talk about it. Everything's fine. No, don't call your sister. I said everything's fine. Get back here. Everything was not fine, though, turns out. And Karajica did get his wish, in a sense, because there will not be 3 leagues running in 2026, just 2. Because the ELF's restructuring is officially full-on insolvency. So, the end result of the ELF's 16 teams is 6 are now in the EFA, 4 are now in the AFLE, that's the breakaway league from the breakaway league I mentioned earlier. Hungary's Fehérvár and Throners have joined the Austrian American Football League, how very Habsburg of them. Switzerland's Helvetic Mercenaries have joined their home country's domestic American Football League. Both the Madrid Bravos and the 2025 title winner Stuttgart Surge went down with the ELF ship and are also insolvent, unfortunately. And the remaining 2 teams are TBD. They have made no official announcements that I have seen, and considering the EFA and AFLE have already announced their 2026 season schedules, it is not looking good for them. A hypothetical F in the chat for the Hamburg Sea Devils and the Cologne Centurions. Trying to explain all of this in a simplified way feels like trying to explain, well, the rules of American football to a European. It just doesn't go through the way you would want it to. There's like layers of sort of localization to it. But the question is this the inevitable fate of this sport on this continent? Like, is Europe too set in its own sports to add a new one to its popular canon nowadays? I think the German Football League is the answer to that question. Behind all of this chaos is a league which has never pulled the mainstream headlines that NFL Europe or the ELF received, at least outside of its home country, but which has quietly become the most consistent American football league in Europe, maybe even in the world, the NFL excluded, over the last 47 years. And it's not without international success stories. Jakob Johnson moved from his hometown team, the Stuttgart Scorpions, to the New England Patriots in 2019 via the NFL's International Player Pathway. He became the first player recruited through this pathway to score a touchdown during a regular season game the following year. And I think the lesson here is that it has to be organic. You can throw money at a million different leagues however many times you want, and they seem intent to do that. But the German Football League maintains because it's built itself up. Teams with local identities, rivalries, and fan cultures. It's a league that reflects both the nation where the sport originated and the nation where the sport is being played. Europe doesn't need a closed league with teams from cities thousands of kilometers away squaring off. That works in the United States. It doesn't work here. Europeans want to be able to load onto a bus and drive to the next city over for their away days. Nobody's going all the way from Prague to Paris unless it's a special occasion like Champions League. Logistically, the transportation costs of a domestic league are also certainly much gentler on the budget, and that's part of what gives this league the time and space that it's needed to take root. You are not getting rid of the German Football League as easily as they got rid of ELF. That is for certain. Okay, this part is anecdotal, but when comparing the big three of US sports here, personally, basketball, baseball, and American football, I would genuinely say that American football is close, if not maybe equal to basketball in terms of how many Europeans that I've met, be they from Germany, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and even more, who have told me that they're interested in the sport, that they actively watch the sport, that they have a favorite NFL team, that they don't get why the Carolina Panthers exist if they're always going to play like that. I know, I agree, we all do. And what that tells me is that this sport doesn't need some grand introduction on this continent or massive marketing push that burns $1 billion. Like, that isn't an amount of money that could have fed a lot of people. There's already an audience here for American football, and I'm sure there are more who would tune in if the conditions were right. I think these leagues should consider what the fans want, though, rather than just what works on the other side of the Atlantic. Okay, that is it, and freeform part. If you are interested in me talking about other American sports being brought over to Europe, certainly I could talk about basketball in Europe. There is a lot of also weird quirkiness and chaos that I don't know if a lot of Americans know about outside of just EuroLeague. If you're interested in that, yeah, subscribe to this, and I'm kind of just doing this video as an experiment, so if people are interested, then I can make more stuff. Maybe I can even do baseball in the future. If not, been nice knowing you.